Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, a future of work consultancy that helps sponsor the Wise Decision Maker Show. Let's talk about making wise decisions about remote work in a recession. So, will a recession decrease remote work, increase remote work? What's up with that? You've probably seen a lot of headlines where they say that remote work will come undone in the recession. So headlines are saying that a recession in the United States, elsewhere, will lead to bosses having an upper hand because the labor market will cool down, and they will be able to coerce workers back to the office against the will of their employees. Employees notoriously want more remote work than their leaders. And so remote work, according to these headlines, will be rolled back due to a recession. That, unfortunately, is the wrong narrative. That's not what actually will happen. I argue that the opposite will occur. Key factors of recession will actually result in more remote work, not less. Let's talk about why. In a remote session, leaders need to be more disciplined, not less disciplined. They need to focus more on their bottom line, not less on their bottom line. So really focus on ROI, getting the most from their investment in their workers, in their office space, in their technology, everything. You have to cut costs and get maximum ROI. And we have a lot of research that remote work produces better ROI compared to in-person work. So this is very, very clear that if you have all full-time or mostly remote work, maybe have your workers come to the office 1 day a week or fully remote work, depending on the scenario and whatever your company's needs are, you will get better ROI. Why is that? This is something that's hard to believe maybe, but we have clear hard data showing it. And leaders in a recession, when they have to practice more financial discipline, they need to embrace these facts rather than their intuitions, their feelings about what works and what doesn't in terms of remote work and office work, hybrid work. We know from extensive research, there's really very little use arguing this, that remote work overall boosts productivity. There's a lot of studies. Sure, surveys extensively show that employees report that they are more productive, quite a bit more productive on average when they work remotely, especially on their individual tasks. And that's confirmed not simply by surveys. You might say, well, employees can lie on surveys because they want to stay home, so they will say that they're more productive. But we have plenty of other evidence. So for example, we have employee software monitoring data showing that employees, in fact, are more productive when they work remotely. Randomized control trials show that people are more productive when they work remotely. For example, there was a study of a company called Trip.com, which is a huge travel agency, and it randomized some of its staff, some programmers, marketing people, financial HR people. Some of them it asked to stay in the office 5 days a week. And some people, it allowed them to work part-time remotely in a hybrid modality. And what it found was that those who worked at least part of their time remotely actually had 35% better retention, which is great, but we're talking about productivity. And looking at very, very hard evidence for productivity, the amount of the lines of code written by programmers who worked part of their time remotely wrote 8% more code. 8% more code instead of just being office-centric. The office-centric ones naturally wrote 8% less code by comparison. So clearly, randomized controlled trial over 6 months, plenty of time to evaluate the impact. We can clearly see in this trial that programmers are, in very hard data, are more productive when working remotely. And of course, given all the other data, that correlates with other types of roles and workers. And we know also that work from home productivity is improving over time. So there was Stanford University study on this question. It looked at efficiency in working from home in May 2020, and it found that it was 5% more efficient to work from home in May 2020 on average than working from the office. By May 2022, this number went to 9%. 9%. Why this improvement over 2 years? Well, because we learned how to work together better. We know how to collaborate together better, how to communicate better. We have better technology, home office setup, leadership. Leaders know how to lead teams better. So that improvement in productivity has grown, not shrunk. So this is really important. People are getting better at working from home. What about innovation and collaboration? Leaders often say, well, people may be individually more productive, but are they really innovating? Are they collaborating effectively? What the research shows is that leaders can't shoehorn traditional office-centric methods into hybrid and remote work for collaboration and innovation. Otherwise, they will indeed suffer. Collaboration and innovation will suffer if you shoehorn traditional office-centric methods into hybrid and remote work. So for example, for collaboration, the Zoom happy hours are not a good way of building social bonds. When you look at the research, people are resentful of being forced to have that socialization of Zoom happy hours. And because it's really not nearly as much fun as in-person happy hours, you don't get the same dynamics, people don't enjoy that. So this is bad. You don't want to do Zoom happy hours with that kind of like forced socialization in that setting. But leaders keep doing it because that's all they know, and they don't know how to do better. There are many, many better practices. Virtually synchronous brainstorming is a much better practice for hybrid and remote teams. And I talk about that in other episodes of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Virtual co-working, an excellent technique to collaborate together. Again, check out the Wise Decision Maker Show episode about this. Worker autonomy, we need to understand, and flexibility, we know that boosts innovation. So rather than forcing people to go back to the office, giving them autonomy is what's going to boost innovation. Giving them flexibility in their home is what's going to boost innovation. And we see that according to a study of 307 companies, worker autonomy and flexibility are better. They cause better innovation. That's really important. We know that the growth in productivity in the pandemic, the growth that there was driven mostly by remote work. So the productivity growth in the US economy, according to a study by the National Bureau of Economic Research, was for service industries relying on work from home, like tech, finance, and so on. It increased by 1.1% from 2010 to 2019. But during the pandemic era, it increased by 3%. So 3.3%, in fact, was the increase for service industries in productivity during the pandemic era when the large majority of service personnel worked remotely. But for industries relying on in-person contact services, so for service industries relying on work from home, the productivity boom was clear, from 1.1% increase per year to a 3.3% increase per year during the 2 years of the pandemic. For industries relying on in-person contact services, restaurants, hospitality, and so on, there was an average increase in productivity of 0.6% per year from 2010 to 2019, but a 2.6 decrease in productivity during the pandemic year. So this is very important for us to understand as well, that we can clearly see that service industries relying on work from home increased their productivity during the pandemic. Those that did not, those that are relying on in-person contact services, decreased their productivity. So, what's up with that? Well, in a recession, we need to understand that companies can save money with remote work. So companies are going to get more productive workers, which of course will save them money because they don't have to hire as many workers to get the same amount of work done, or in other words, they can get their existing workforce to get more output, to get more output done. So if they need the same amount of output, they can let go of some people if they have their staff working remotely, versus if they have office-centric staff, well, they need to they will be less productive. So they need to retain their office-centric staff, and that's going to cause companies to be hurt in terms of their bottom line. Now, interestingly, it's not people aren't only more productive in remote settings, they're also willing to accept less money to keep working from home, which means you have the benefits of higher productivity and you have the benefits of lower cost. It's beneficial in both ways. So remote work lessened wage growth by 2% in the first 2 years of the pandemic, according to another study from the National Bureau of Economic Research. The reasons is that workers valued remote work as a big benefit. So they were willing to accept lower wages for remote work, which is great for companies that want to pay less. 64% of people at top companies of 3,000 workers were willing to forego a $30,000 raise for permanent remote work. Think about that. $30,000 to 64%, just under 2/3 of workers at top companies. That's a huge amount of money that you can just not pay workers if you allow them to work permanently remotely. That's great, isn't it? That cost of labor are going to be down. And hiring remote workers will cost you less in a number of ways. So not only do you have to pay people less because they want remote work, you can also hire employees from anywhere. Lower cost of living areas, so you don't have to pay them as much according to their cost of living. And even across the globe, you don't have to hire employees only in the United States, you can hire them globally. So we can see that remote work helps decrease employee costs, and therefore that will be, again, another big benefit in the recession. So again, more productive, you don't have to pay as much money for the same output, and you actually have savings on the cost end because employees are willing to accept lower salaries for remote work, and you can hire employees from lower cost of living areas, whether in your own country or in other countries. Also, we know that work from home improves both recruitment and retention, and of course you'll still need to recruit some people even during a recession. So employees prefer work from home very clearly. 6 in 10 employees would prefer to apply for a remote job rather than in office-centric job, according to a study by Morning Consult. And if they're forced to return to office, 64% of workers would look for a new job, according to a study by the ADP Institute. Flexibility is incredibly high in rankings for job satisfaction, for what people feel satisfied by. Over retirement benefits, over health insurance, the only thing that is higher than flexibility for job satisfaction is compensation. So it's the only thing that's higher for flexibility. And we know that people are willing to trade off a significant amount of money, for people at top companies, $30,000, about 2/3, just under 2/3 of the workers are willing to trade off $30,000 for the flexibility of permanent remote work. And so that's according to a study by Future Forum. And we have hybrid work improving retention by over 1/3. I mentioned the study with the randomized controlled trials. That was, again, in the National Bureau of Economic Research. We have similar findings. So these are about companies, private sectors, but public sector employees, government employees, we know the same things apply to them. So Cisco's survey of government employees found that 66% prefer 3 to 5 remote work days. So mostly remote work of 3 to 4 to 5 days working from home per week. 85% said flexibility to do remote work increases job satisfaction. Again, very important. So only 15% want full-time in-office work. And many companies we know are doubling down on remote work right now. So here's an example of my client, the Jaeb Center for Health Research. Over 85% of its staff in a survey preferred fully remote work. So this was something that I found, and the leadership, after deliberating and talking to me, looking at the options, decided to adopt a home-centric model where people only come to the office for important meetings or trainings, and if they want to, for collaboration, but otherwise working fully remotely. Remote work also supports diversity efforts, which is another benefit, of course, of remote work. So new underrepresented people prefer remote work to in-office work. For example, there was a survey by Future Forum that found that 21% of white knowledge workers prefer full-time office work. What about black knowledge workers? Only 3% prefer full-time office work compared to 21% of white knowledge workers. That's a huge difference. What explains it? Well, remote work is helpful for underrepresented groups. It protects them from microaggressions of various sorts in the office, discrimination. And so there's definitely benefits to underrepresented groups of working remotely. And so we know that diversity improves financial decision making. So companies that are more diverse show better financial performance. That's definitely a lot of evidence for that. And we also know that diverse teams make overall better decisions. So better decision making, better financial performance if you're more diverse, and remote work facilitates diversity. So the interesting case study of Meta, which used to be Facebook. So Meta's 2022 diversity report still owns Facebook. So this is Facebook Plus. So Meta's 2022 diversity report, we find that Meta decided to offer some fully remote options. Early on in the pandemic said, hey, we're going to offer some permanent fully remote options. And that helped it achieve its 5-year diversity goals 2 years early. In 2019, Meta set a 5-year plan for diversity, for its diversity goals. And of course, that was way before the pandemic. So it set a plan, said, here's what we're going to do by 2024. And it found that already by this year, 2022, it achieved its 5-year diversity goals, 2 years ahead of schedule. All because underrepresented groups were more interested in remote positions. And so they applied for them in larger numbers, and therefore Meta achieved its diversity goals. Great for Meta, and great for any other company that decides to offer fully remote options or mostly remote options. And we know that clearly diversity is correlated to financial performance and to better decision making. We also know that you can save a lot of costs on remote work. You don't need as much office space, expenses associated with office space, utilities, cleaning, security, and so on, furniture and so on. That is going to be quite a bit of cost savings. So that's great. And we know that demand for real estate and rents fell the most in regions offering more remote employment, which again shows that remote employment more remote work results in companies cutting on real estate costs and services. And companies should really invest some of that money in providing home office upgrades for their staff. For example, my client, the Information Sciences Institute at the University of Southern California, invested heavily into good home office upgrades for its staff. And that improved staff satisfaction and retention, and it improved staff productivity, and it improved staff well-being, so decreasing their sick leave and absence days, making them, again, more productive, more retained, better well-being. All great. So even in a recession, it's a wise idea to invest into home office upgrades for your staff. It will definitely pay off. Now, the broader narrative here is that traditionalist executives who really want to see workers in the office, they do have to accept the facts. Traditionalist executives eventually will be pulled over the finish line of accepting remote work in a recession because they'll have a lot of cost savings, productivity improvements, and less leeway, remember, for personal preferences due to belt tightening. So these traditionalist executives, if they want to perform well financially, they will welcome more remote work. And we know that great leaders are leaders who aren't afraid to change their minds. Surviving a recession requires leaders to overcome cognitive dissonance and gut reactions and really accept reality. So courageous leaders embrace change, and second-rate leaders resist change because of cognitive biases, dangerous judgment errors, mental blind spots, like the confirmation bias, where we tend to look for information that confirms our beliefs and ignore information that doesn't. And the ostrich effect, the nihilism of negative information about reality. Traditional leaders resisting these facts will lose out. I can guarantee that. So less competent leaders rely more on intuition, less on facts. As a result, in a recession, they will cause their firms to underperform, and they will be replaced by better, more savvy leaders. And so that's why recession will increase remote work. It will not decrease remote work. And that's been another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to leave a review on Apple iTunes, Amazon Podcasts, whatever you're listening to this podcast. Or leave a comment on YouTube if you're watching the videocast version of this podcast. We have a lot more information about this topic in the show notes with all the citations for the information I discussed in this episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. And I hope that you subscribe to it, whether in iTunes or on YouTube, wherever you're checking us out. All right, everyone. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Again, my name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky, and I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, a future work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And I look forward to you making the wisest and most profitable decisions until I see you again.